Scholars, it's Brian once again. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how to make claims in argumentation. Really, when we're talking about how to make claims, we're talking about the power of rhetoric, a term we introduced in the last module. It has long origins. It's one that sticks with us today. Imagine that you had to choose between these two, let's call them powers. The first is the power to impose your will on others through the use of words, to be able to make people do whatever you want. Or on the upper side, choose between that and the power to be armed against that power, the ability to dissect and to critically understand attempts that other people make to impose their will upon you. And you might call this like, is it better to have mind control or be on the defense against mind control? These are important questions. You may choose it's more important to be able to influence other people, but you could never be sure that your will is your own. You might be influenced by other folks as well. Well, the great news about rhetoric and advocacy is you don't have to choose between these two, because advocacy is actually both of them, which is why sometimes we call rhetoric sort of like the defense against the dark arts. Remember from the Hogwarts movies, Harry Potter-esque? Rhetoric is the ability not only to construct persuasive discourses, like they did in the advocacy we talked about with ancient Greece, but also it's the ability to understand and be critical of persuasive discourses used against you, a useful skill. We're going to start talking about that with the understanding of rhetorical studies. Rhetorical studies, which this course is a part of, is really divided between rhetorical theory, that is how discourse works, and rhetorical criticism, which explores examples of discourse in action. When we're talking about discourse in action, one of those is we're talking about argumentation. Our textbook defines argumentation as the study of principles by which beliefs and actions are evaluated and related to one another. It's a language-based social phenomena that enables us to discover what beliefs and actions are reasonable in any social context, and that's concerned with the selection and organization of ideas to justify particular positions. That's how Ziegelmuller and Kay come up with the idea that argumentation is both inquiry or discovery and advocacy or putting forth different ideas. All of those come together to form an idea of argument as our single unit of thought for the process of making things work in advocacy. And we might go a little bit further and say that the term argument is a little bit of a tricky one because it actually can mean more than one thing. So in argumentation studies, we divide argument into argument 1 and argument 2. Argument 1 is a claim, a statement made. Argument as a product. In other words, when someone says, you made a really good argument that day. That's one meaning of the term argument. But a second meaning is to discuss argument as a dialogic process, an exchange between two or more people. Like when you walk into the room and people are having a heated discussion, you'd say they're having an argument. So we designate argument 1 and argument 2 to talk about the differences that the term has between those different things. And believe it or not, there's actually people who even study argument 0. That is the psychological process that you might have of deciding amongst yourself what the best course of action is. That's also a form of argument according to most scholars. Well, what is argument 1? Argument 1, what is a statement? We define argument 1 as a complete unit of thought containing data, a reasoning process, and a conclusion. So what we're going to do in this course is try and break all of those things down. Let's start at the end with the conclusion. We call that conclusion a claim. A claim is a single statement advanced for the adherence of others. There are different types of claims that we want to get familiar with. We're going to talk about 3 types of claims. The first of those is a claim of fact. The claim of fact, it doesn't mean that something is true or not. It means that you're talking about and arguing about a past, present, or future observable condition. So claims of fact discuss things that are going to happen, like who will win the Super Bowl game, who's going to win the baseball game, what's the temperature going to be outside. All of those are observable conditions. Whether we know them or not, we have to have arguments over them, and that's the conditions for claims of fact that we have. Now these things can actually be false. You can have false statements that are observable. Those are still claims of fact. In fact, we're quite familiar with this because of the idea of the fact check. The fact check means we're having arguments over things that are observable, but we don't know if they are true or not. Remember, argumentation is inquiry and advocacy, so the process of discovery is a big part of it. Second type of claim is the claim of value. Claims of value contain a value term. That's a word that expresses judgment, belief, or opinion. When you say they did a great job in the Super Bowl game, you're using a claim of value. When you're talking about things are going to be problematic in the future, you're using a claim of value. It's not an observable condition. It expresses somebody's opinion, belief, or judgment. Third type of claim is the claim of policy. Claim of policy concerns a course of action. That's the broadest definition of policy that we can possibly have. These claims are usually easily identified through the words should, must, or ought. Those are terms that indicate changes in the course of action. If someone talks to you and says we should lower the drinking age, they're talking about a claim of policy. If someone says you ought to go to the movies with me, that's still a claim of policy. It's not governmental direction, but it's a change in our course of action. Now these three types of claims, they're actually incredibly related. You need observable conditions to be able to establish opinions on a subject. You need opinions on a subject to be able to derive what course of action we can have. So these claims, fact, value, and policy, they all go hand in hand. And that's the beginning to our study in rhetoric and advocacy.